At the time of this recording, we are facing a pandemic that is unlike anything that anyone alive today has ever experienced. It's scary when our vulnerability, our awareness of our human vulnerability is heightened. It's scary when we realize that our health could be jeopardized, that our financial portfolios are threatened. It's scary to think about the ways that this may be a long road to recovery for many of us, financially, health-wise, or otherwise. See, in the midst of a crisis, our vulnerability is heightened, which causes many of us naturally to close up and to self-protect. But what does it look like for us to do more than just practice social distancing during this time, but to also be a servant, either virtually or perhaps for some of us interpersonally? A servant leader is someone who puts we before me. The key question that we need to ask ourselves is, who is our we that we can put before me? Who are those individuals under our care that we can serve? And we can learn from so many virtuous individuals today who are rising to the occasion, who are answering the call to be a servant leader during this time. Servant leadership is something that started in the 1970s. There's an individual named Robert Greenleaf who inspired this movement. And quite frankly, this has just exponentially increased in terms of its relevance in the last few months. A servant leader is someone like a healthcare worker who, while GM has not been able to manufacture masks fast enough, is still responding to the needs of patients without the protective equipment that they require and sacrificing potentially their own health for the common good of all of those patients that they're serving. A servant leader is someone like the CEO of Texas Roadhouse, who gave up his entire salary and stock for this year so that he wouldn't have to fire his employees. Servant leader is someone like the CEO of Qantas Airlines, who did something similar. We can learn from these individuals and their virtuous behavior. And when we pay attention to the decisions that we make, indeed we realize that what is going to be required of a leader who chooses to be a servant first and a leader next is self-sacrifice for the betterment of our common humanity. What does that look like for you within your sphere of influence? What does it look like for you to be self-sacrificial for your we during this time? This is a critical question that I want to challenge you to ask. And these principles of servant leadership can guide us to a deeper awareness of the decisions that we can make during this difficult time. We need to be active listeners. For all of us within our spheres of influence, we need to listen deeply and empathetically to the needs of those under our care. Servant leader is someone who isn't just willing to self-sacrifice, but is also willing to persuade others to do similarly, because there are not enough servant leaders today to answer this call to action that we have. What does it look like for you to inspire other people within your sphere of influence to also rise to the occasion, to put we before me? Servant leader is someone who has a deep awareness of a problem and a desire to bring people together so that they can answer that problem within their sphere of influence. Servant leader is someone whose foresight depends on the knowledge of other people that they trust as moral exemplars in their life, who are either alive today or who have taken great actions in the past that can be representative of what it means to sacrifice for the betterment of us all. Many of us who are religious can look to figures such as Jesus Christ or the Buddha or one of the avatars of the Hindu faith tradition to see perhaps what it would be like to make those sacrifices for the betterment of us all. Servant leader is someone who is a steward of resources during this time, and not just for herself or himself, but for all people who are involved in his or her sphere of influence. Servant leader is someone who is committed to the growth of people, not just when things are good, but also, and perhaps even more importantly, in the face of a crisis such as this. Servant leader is someone who realizes that social distancing is not easy. We are naturally dialogical human beings, which means that we need, in some fundamental way, connection with other people in order to flourish. So what does it look like for you to contribute to the flourishing of other people by remaining connected in some way? Connection is one of the best ways, in fact, that we can curb the anxiety and the depression that a season such as this can cause. What does it look like for you to be a servant leader within your sphere of influence during this time? What does it look like for you to put your sphere of influence before your own needs? And can that bring about healing, not just for others, but maybe even for yourself? There's something beautiful and spiritual about all of us as human beings. It seems like there's some kind of principle at work in what it means to be human, which operates in such a way that actually when we sacrifice, we grow in terms of our character. When we sacrifice, we inspire other people to do similarly. We need to replicate this model of servant leadership by being a servant leader and by putting our we before our own interests. But this is not easy. This is going to be very difficult. Perhaps this could cost you financially if you choose to take actions for the betterment of individuals within your sphere of influence who have been furloughed or fired during this time. Maybe that will cost you something financially. Maybe it will cost you something health-wise to serve during this time, as so many inspirational healthcare workers, including some who have died without the protective equipment they need, have done. Servant leader is someone who realizes that actually we can't serve unless we are working on our character in such a way that we're prepared to do so. See, you can't just choose to be a servant leader. You have to understand what it means to orient yourself towards this global crisis in such a way that you can rise to the occasion. And this is something that's going to be very difficult. So we need to have our spiritual cups full, so to speak. What does it look like for you to maintain your own spiritual health during this difficult season so that you can be full enough to continue to go out and serve within your sphere of influence? What spiritual practices do you have that fill your cup so that you can go out and fill the cups of others? This is an important question that we have to ask during this season. See, spiritual emptiness is incompatible with the ability to be a servant leader. We need to be spiritually full so that we can rise to this occasion. So spend some time reflecting on your own self-transcendent purpose. Spend some time reflecting on what it looks like for you to fill your cup so that you can best serve other people. Our minds are troubled today. But what does it look like to face this difficult season in the midst of our own anxieties so that we can contribute to the common good of others? How can we learn from those virtuous exemplars that we see today who are answering the call to lead and sacrificing their own financial success or their own health during this difficult season? Caring and being compassionate is something that is just foundational to this idea of servant leadership. When we can temper our fears that are associated with this heightened awareness of our human vulnerability by tapping into the spiritual resources from our faith tradition that we have, how can that contribute to the betterment of us all? What does it look like for you to be a servant leader in your sphere of influence during this difficult season that is unprecedented for all of us who are alive today?